Ah yes, Dungeoneering, a skill that a lot of people love and a skill that a lot of people hate. And this video will be talking about it. Now, before I start, I think I need to address if Dungeoneering should be a skill or not, because I think that a lot of people do end up bringing that question all the time. I don't want to waste much time talking about that in this video, because I think it could be a video on its own, since it's a common argument that people usually use. So let's just say that a skill in RuneScape is to game design what point and click is to the game mechanics, alright? It's just really needed for the core. So should engineering be a skill? 100%. So now let's actually talk about the skill. Let's talk about the things that I actually like. Let's talk about the things that I don't like. Let's talk about maybe some solutions to some of the problems that I had with this skill. And yeah, let's get to it. So starting with the things I like, honestly probably my favorite thing is the scalability that the skill actually has, be it with high levels, low levels. You don't need any requirements. Since you can't bring your own items, you also really don't need any prerequisites to actually do the skill. You can just come into the skill, do the skill, have fun and train it. I think that's really good because it makes it accessible towards everyone. Not just people that are starting the account, but people that are maybe later on their account development. You don't need to do it at a specific time or anything like that. It's not locked by anything. You can just essentially do it whenever you want, whenever you feel like it, and I think that having a skill like that is actually a really positive thing. Secondly, I really love the optimization that you have at higher levels. Like, don't get me wrong, this skill is definitely way better to do at higher levels, especially once you have the elite diaries done and the elite garage outfit. And once you do, it gets incredibly fun to actually optimize the routes that you take, the rooms that you do, and everything. Right, like some of the puzzles are slower, some are faster, some are more fun than others to complete, and the overall variety is really nice, but it's really fun to just optimize when to create another stone gate, when to teleport to your original one, where you're going to drop it so you can go back easily. Overall, it's just really fun to try and optimize, and it feels like you're just doing a speed run. Obviously, due to its random nature, it's easier to have these optimizations happen because you have far more to optimize, since there's much more RNG involved. But even then, I just think that the skill has enough depthness to be optimized, and I think that that's something that I also really like about the skill, and something that honestly impressed me when I was actually going for 120 is just the amount of depthness that the skill actually has. You have a lot of mechanics, you have a lot of bosses, you have a lot of rooms, a lot of resources, all the way more resources. You have just a bunch of lore as well. You have different floors, and you have 60 floors in total, so different types of floors, and you just have so much variety and choice when it comes to how you tackle it. You have small floors, you have medium floors, large floors. You can tackle it alone or up to 5 friends. You can change the complexity, you can turn guide mode on. There's just so many things you can do to just make the experience of the skill and the way you tackle it fresh. Obviously, the way you earn XP is a bit more hard-coded, I guess, as there's a specific order for you to do the floors in and what type of floors to do to get the most XP per hour. But you don't even need it to actually earn good XP. You don't need to do any of that. I got 120 by doing sheer small floors only. I never did a medium or a large floor. It was all small floors. You also have hard mode, which is an extra challenge if you want to do it. So yeah, there's so much to do. And when it comes to being so much to do, I really like just unique boss mechanics. Now, the puzzles can be fun at points, and some of them are pretty clever, but when it comes to the boss mechanics, this is what I really enjoyed, because this skill actually came out before EOC. So a lot of the bosses are really fun to just figure out when it comes to the mechanics they have, because a lot of them feel like you're just trying to solve a puzzle. So for example, one of the bosses, you need to light some braziers to damage it, right? Because it's a high boss, so you know, you have to like blind his eyes in order to actually do damage. Another boss, for example, spawns these teleporters on the ground that you have to make him step over so his defense goes down, so you have an easier time killing it, otherwise his defense goes up. My favorite is probably the gluttonous behemoth, the first boss that you ever encounter, because the first time I was killing it, It was just healing, and I was like, what the hell is going on? Maybe if I just step in front of the heal, it can't heal anymore, and yeah, it couldn't heal anymore. And like, these mechanics feel... Every boss only has one, so all bosses aren't really overly complicated. They're super simple, they have one mechanic that you have to figure out, and that's pretty much it. And I think they're just really fun. I think that a lot of them are really creative, especially for being pre-OC bosses, for being... We're talking about old school RuneScape wasn't even released at a time, so you know, none of these fancy mechanics that we have today. So overall, I was really impressed with the unique boss mechanics. And lastly, I really enjoy the rewards. I think that Dungeoneering is probably one of the most rewarding skills in the game right now. The amount of stuff that you have, not just within the dungeons, but especially outside of it, and not just stuff that it's iconic like the chaotic weapons, just overall, you know, a bunch of rewards, be it drop cleaners, be it the pets, for example, that you have, the demon horn necklace, for example, which is still pretty useful, and be it the new elite dungeon shop that you can also buy a bunch of stuff for. I think it's just really useful mechanics, or really useful rewards rather, and I just think it's really rewards that you should go for. They're fun, and honestly, it's probably one of the best shops in the game, I would say. So yeah, a lot of good things. But obviously, I think that not everything is perfect, so let's talk about the things that I actually didn't quite enjoy as much. So I talked about how it's really fun to optimize the skill when you're at higher levels. Yeah, when you're at lower levels, sometimes you can have a couple of struggles. Like, for example, if you're just starting the skill, it might be a bit hard for you to actually get good weapons and armors. Yeah, sure, the monsters' levels do scale to yours, but I had to do... Like, I was 30 magic and I had to do the floors with a level 1 ones, because that was the one that spawned, and since I didn't have a fletching level to craft another one, that was the one I was stuck with for a couple of floors. Let me just tell you, not a fun thing whatsoever. Like not fun at all. I think that this could be solved by simply giving players higher chances to spawn gear, because throughout all of my grind, the highest level of spawning gear that I saw was a level 21. I never saw anything higher than that, right? So since I don't have the fletching level, it can be a bit bad to have to just do a bunch of floors to train my fletching slowly until eventually I can craft the weapon I want, which by that point might already be outdated. So I think that having an easier way to, you know, at least give some gear to the beginners would be good. I think that just you should make the gear be able to spawn in the original rune up to maybe a tier below what you are. So if you're, you know, level 50 magic, for example, you can spawn weapons that are tier 40, which right now it just seems that the tiers available are actually 2 tiers below or something like that. But yeah, I think that, you know, the lower floors, and especially you know, as you go down into the dungeon, the chance for it should be higher, but I don't think it should be impossible for you to get, because it is miserable sometimes when you find some monsters that have, for example, high magic defense, and you're just sitting there splashing, and you just... it's miserable. It feels miserable at points. And that also goes with the fact that some bosses at some point do not have total level scaling, or at least they don't seem to have. While lower level bosses at the lower floors seem to scale at max to like level 20, maybe 30, at some point the bosses, the lower level bosses that I was getting was level 91, when I was like level 50 combat. The problem with this is, I don't know if the bosses were scaled with EOC or not, or I don't know if it's just because the bosses were scaled to my level in terms of attacks, but the bosses weren't doing that much damage. Like, the bosses were doing pitiful damage to me. But because they were level 91 combat, I was just continuous splashing on them. Even with the best weapon I could have at the time, I was just splashing for 5 minutes straight. This is just not fun. So I think that they should really reduce the defense, or just make the boss scale entirely to your level, and make all of the bosses be able to scale up to the max combat level, or at least lower the defense of some bosses, because again, it feels punishing to be a lower level player that you're just exploring the dungeons, and once you get too low into the dungeons, you just have to stop because your levels just aren't good enough, so you're not having fun anymore. I just don't think that should be a thing. If the levels and if the enemies, especially in the dungeon, are going to scale, bosses should be no exception. Especially because, again, it's not necessarily hard to beat the bosses, it's just that you sit there splashing, just waiting for the hits that you eventually will do. And thirdly, when it comes to lower levels, some skilling doors have way too higher levels. You know, the doors that need specific skills to open and to unlock? Some of them just have crazy levels. I was level 1 farming, and I found a door that required level 105 farming. I understand why sometimes this happens, so you're obligated to maybe craft a potion that, you boost so you can actually open the door, so you actually end up using the resources of the dungeon, but there's no potion that makes it so I can skip that many levels, and I find sometimes several doors per floor like that. It feels punishing for you to try and just explore the dungeon and then you get stopped by an arbitrary level. If the dungeons are supposed to scale, these doors should scale to you, and they should always be possible, even with a potion, to open, because it just feels punishing. Now, I understand that these doors do count for extra XP at the end of the dungeon, because they count as bonus rooms, and the more bonus rooms you explore, you get extra XP, but I have a solution for that later on, because I would like to talk about another point first, and then we'll touch on that, which is the bosses and certain of the boss mechanics can be fun. Most of them get absolutely pulverized by UC. Like, some bosses I didn't even know the mechanics until I played a lower level account where I actually had to engage with the mechanics to learn what the boss was. For example, the boss that you have to have him step over his own portal so his defense goes down, because otherwise he just has way too high defense for you to do anything. I did not know that that's what he did. I didn't even know he spawned like these portals on the ground, because with my high level account I would just absolutely blow him over, right? And I guess that's one of the downsides of EOC. The problem is, certain bosses you can just blow them up, like the luminescent ice fiend, for example, that gets immune, so you need to actually go through his mechanic, which is just avoiding icicles from the ceiling until he's vulnerable again. So when you are grinding the skill, some bosses you won't even know their mechanics, while others you just can't skip their mechanics, and this becomes kind of frustrating after a while, so that's the downside of having unique boss mechanics for every boss. And lastly, earning tokens kinda sucks, not gonna lie. Like, it's just not fun to earn tokens. I mean, right now, the best way to earn Dungeoneering tokens is through elite dungeons. And look, I know they're elite dungeons, you should earn Dungeoneering tokens for doing elite dungeons. I just don't think this should be the best way of earning Dungeoneering tokens. Like, I think that the skill should still be the best way of earning tokens. But because the tokens are tied to the XP you get, essentially just much more efficient to do elite dungeons than to actually earn tokens. But here's what I would like to propose a solution. When I said to remove the skills or the skill requirements from the skilling doors, essentially that means they don't actually need any skill to do Dungeoneering. Except, what if we actually rewarded players for engaging with the skill as a whole? Right now, a lot of players, what they do is just they rush through the dungeon, they explore all the bonus rooms they can, and then they just move on to the next floor. It's just much better XP per hour to do that than to stop and mine or fish and turn those into armor or cook the fish or whatever. It's pointless. So what if you created maybe an NPC or something like that, where if you hand them raw resources or resources that you scavenge from killing monsters, or that you cooked, potions that you made, armor that you made, for example, and you gave it to this NPC, and this NPC would essentially just, at the end of the dungeon, reward you with extra tokens depending on how many resources you gave to them and how many resources you depleted in the dungeon and stuff like that. This way, yes, you would be sacrificing XP per hour, but you'd be earning more tokens per hour, and it would also solve the issue that Dungeoneering currently has, which is not a lot of people do engage with their mechanics. A lot of people just sort of, when it comes to scavenging resources, you just don't, because it's way slower and you don't get rewarded for doing so. So I think that having something that actually rewards you to do the skill would be much better, because this way you actually value all the parts of the skill, and at the same time you would solve the problem of earning tokens being way too slow for most people. But yeah, that's pretty much my take on Dungeoneering. I actually quite like it, and I was surprised to encounter the depth that the skill has. And I mean, it was one of the skills that I most dreaded training, and it was my second 120. So I think that just goes to show the potential that the skill actually has. And yeah, maybe you should go and watch my No Bank series, which is my RuneScape 3 Ultimate Ironman, where I cannot use a bank. The card is on the screen.